Ta.
We love the smell of Castellar.
Yeah, too stroke.